Hello again, Steve here with a bit of a comment about something that bubbled up from one of the last videos I did. I don't know if sure it was the last one, but this idea of the worthy ideal, right? Of the something or some idea which we come to understand is in a way greater than us, right? And that came out, the thought of this probably came out of the Earl Nightingale quote that I probably misquoted, but that success is the continual realization of a worthy goal or ideal. And this is, I think, important when we take something on, when we're deciding whether or not we should take something on. Because a lot of times we have all kinds of things going on in our lives, right? And our desktops are disorderly, our lives are disorderly, we get this project going, that project going on. And sometimes we're trying to figure out, well, how do I make this priority? Well, I think that gets helped by having the worthy ideal. Now, I'm going to use this example. It's a very cliched example, I suppose, and, very much disagreed by somebody and so on, especially somebody like Christopher Hitchens as an example, who called Mother Teresa Hell's Angel. But whether we agree with Mother Teresa or admire Mother Teresa or whatever it is, nevertheless, we could learn from what it is that she did. What did she do? She took on this massive project of trying to basically help all these pathetic people in the streets of Calcutta and then eventually around the world by setting it up as this worthy ideal, which was like bigger than herself. And how did she do it? Well, a lot of what she did was she lived as an ascetic nun. I mean, nothing else really seemed to matter for this woman, although she did admit to having times of doubt and so on, which is, I think, the sign of somebody who actually reflects on what they're doing. They're not completely dogmatic, right? Say, well, if one is completely dogmatic, then there's never any doubt. I mean, just, Jacobin France. I mean, those guys were completely on board with the idea of just killing anybody who disagreed with them. That's doctrine that grabs a hold of somebody completely. Yes, I'm sure that Mother Teresa was incredibly dogmatic, but at least she did have those times of humility or of reflection and so on, right? But that's not so much what I'm talking about here, which is this, the help we can get from having a bigger picture ideal to sort our lives out. And I have this little, sometimes when these ideas come to me, they get distilled a bit more in the process of me wanting to create a speech somewhere down the road, but also they come together in little pieces as I go along. So for example, I was at the gym early this morning and I had a piece of paper, which wasn't this one, I've lost it since, but at least I don't know what happened to it, but I drew it a little picture like this, just a little sketch to get the idea visibly in my mind, and I'll try to reproduce that here, which is that if we look at ourselves in the world, right, we can look at ourselves individually as a small entity with everything else going on. And then if we set up this idea of an ideal or a project, which is somehow bigger than us. I mean, it's hard to imagine that somebody like Mother Teresa going into Calcutta and seeing all these people all over the place. It must have looked overwhelming. It must have looked bigger than herself, in a way, right? But what did she do? She injected herself into that cause, that ideal. So in a way, it becomes like an ego stripped away, larger sense of self. It's like she's no longer living just for the titillation of herself. It's hard to imagine Mother Teresa titillating herself. It's rather cringeworthy, but she doesn't, in a way. At least it's hard to imagine. There's this set aside of the typical ego that I'm just going to gratify myself. But of course, long term, there's huge life fulfillment can come from that, right? So that in a way there is that long term, that deferral of gratitude, of gratification rather, that it comes in spades, can come in spades later on. But nevertheless, injecting ourselves into that larger ideal It's like we become a larger sense of self. And then, in order to sort our life out, if we gather up all the aspects of our lives, our relationships, our current projects, and so on, and stuff them all in, like right, the way we often are, is that ourselves and all this stuff we got going on around us. And some of it's rather disparate. It doesn't really relate to one to the other. But if all of a sudden we have our energies focused onto something that's bigger than us, like a cause or whatever, we can then try to funnel this stuff. And the reality is that some of it's not going to fit. It's not going to fit into that. Like there's not enough room for it. There's our ideal and ourselves expanded into the ideal. Well, where does this project that doesn't relate fit in there? Maybe it doesn't. And maybe we have to actually kick out some of the stuff in our lives. And in some cases, we have to bring in other things. But nevertheless, it's a process, I think, that we can use to help to guide our lives in a way, to funnel our lives into a more orderly way of having this grander purpose. And then from within that, then we set our goals and so on to forward this ideal. But I know I've struggled with this because I have the tendency to be all off the charts in terms of, I talk to my sister sometimes, and she's kind of a person who brings me back to the conversation, because I'll start talking along about, we're talking about this, and all of a sudden I go off here, and she'll go, hang on a second, come back, we haven't finished this one yet, But it's my tendency to be all over the place and have all kinds of stuff going on. I look around in this room, and I got crap hanging all over the walls, all over this place. It's just something I like. But sometimes those sorts of things hanging up all over the place result in real life distractions in things that I'm doing, and in things that many of us are doing, which an example like Mother Teresa, I believe, is something for us to consider, because we consider what she was doing was very, very large in comparison to what many people would do, shall we say. But she appeared to do it without a whole lot of trappings. Yes, people will say the trappings were that she was getting money from dictators and so on. And perhaps that is true, but I'm not putting a moral judgment on it here. I'm just saying that when we have this larger ideal and we inject ourselves into it, if it is genuinely a larger ideal than ourselves, by the very nature of it, we have to kind of check ego at the door and immediate self-gratification at the door. And with that, we can get greater clarity on what in our life fits in that journey and what doesn't, and what it is that we have to bring on board in order for us to get it. So it helps us to streamline and empowers us then to push on to that ideal with the goals that we set within it, if that makes any sense. Just some thoughts on it anyways, but I wanted to share it because I'm putting this together for some sort of a presentation, and it's just I just wanted to share the distillation of some of my thoughts that came about as I was in the gym this morning. Steve here, great chatting. If you like what I'm doing, please like, subscribe, and share. I know some people have commented that my video quality is absolutely terrible. Low, it's like 420p or whatever it is. I do that somewhat deliberately because I don't have a lot of storage on my iPhone. So hopefully the content is valuable for at least a few people, enough to just turn a video off then maybe. And if the sound quality is not great, let me know too, because eventually I should upgrade both the video and sound quality, production quality. I get it, and hopefully that's coming soon enough. Steve here, great chatting. Talk again soon. Bye for now.